Okay, so today is your chance to get to know my Necron history a little bit more as we look at the Warhammer Community post Necron Miniatures Through the Ages, and I share why this post made me sad face. It's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, first of all I want to say a massive thank you to all of my new subscribers. I've gained quite a few subscribers over the last 2 or 3 months, and I do really appreciate everyone that's pressed the subscribe button. If you're enjoying my videos and you haven't subscribed yet, then I would really appreciate it if you could do so. I've got a little personal goal to get to 20,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and if you can help me get there, that will be awesome. And when I hit 20,000 subscribers, I'm going to do a huge Necron giveaway on the channel, so another reason to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss an upload. Right, today I want to talk about Necrons Through the Ages. This is a Warhammer Community post that went up not that long ago, and I thought it would be a fantastic idea if I went through this post having a look at what Games Workshop say about the history of Necrons, and also to let you know my history of Necrons, because as I said, I've got a lot of new subscribers who probably don't really know my history. So here we go. We all know that Necrons have been around for millions of years, but did you know just how long the Necron Warrior has been around as a model for? Today we're going to take a look back at its distant origins and how they have changed over the decades. If you're a bit rusty, this is the perfect place to start, and you don't even have to pass a capture to prove you're not a Necron. So there's Games Workshop's capture joke, because of course they've had quite a few complaints around getting onto the website and having to do the capture thing every time. So I started the hobby in around 2001. I always say around because I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was 2001. And I do know that the Necron Codex, back then the 3rd edition Codex, hadn't been out that long, a couple of years, which, although that sounds like quite a long time these days, back then that was a very short space of time, because it actually took 10 years for my Necron Codex to be updated. However, I wasn't there right at the beginning of Necrons, so I'm also very interested to find out more. Now first we get an image of an old Necron. This is actually an image from the 3rd edition Necron Codex, my personal favourite codex. We were playing around mid 3rd edition when I first started, so I've played every edition since then, and I try to play as much as possible, at least once a week. Now looking at this picture of the warrior just here, I think you can see why Games Workshop have gone down this sort of broken, battered warrior look for the new warriors, because the original artwork is like that. Plus the head in this picture is quite a bit downwards into the body, which the warriors which I started with, the heads weren't like that, and I always looked at this artwork thinking it just doesn't quite look like my models. However, the warrior didn't start there, so let's have a look at the beginning, a chaotic beginning. The early 1990s were a confusing time. Necrons didn't exist yet, while Zotes roamed the galaxy with impurity. Then along came the boxed game Space Crusade featuring Chaos Androids. Okay, technically not a Necron Warrior, but it has more than a few similarities. Evil looking robot, check. Strange esoteric weapon, check. These Chaos Androids were clearly the inspiration to the Necrons that would follow. As if that wasn't enough, their lore stated that they were created by squats who had turned to chaos. Okay, so 1990 and Space Crusade. Now I actually have a box of Space Crusade which I've bought in a second-hand shop. It does have a couple of bits missing. However, my Space Crusade seems to be more about Blood Angels and Tyranids. There were some android things in there, but there were more sort of walkers, and well, those were missing. And I can't see any reference to this particular miniature being in that box, on the box itself. But like I said, I bought mine second hand. This is way before my time. Now, if you happen to have one of these miniatures lying around that you no longer want, I would be very interested in obtaining it from you. So if that is the case, then please let me know in the comments box below. I'd love to own this in my collection. But I certainly didn't know that the first concept for Necrons was actually in Space Crusade, and they weren't even a Necron, they were Chaos androids. However, they of course were the first of many. For 8 years, Space Marines merrily gunned down, and were gunned down by, Chaos androids, and still no one had heard the word Necron. Then came White Dwarf 217, and within its howling pages we got our first glimpse at these mechanoids. Okay, so 8 years later, so we're talking about 1998, the first Necron miniature came, and it was in White Dwarf. I don't own that White Dwarf, so it's great to have the number 217, because I'm definitely going to search for that on eBay if I can and try to get that, because again, that would be fantastic to have in my collection. Now, I am aware that that copy of White Dwarf came with a free Necron miniature. I actually own a few of these. Actually, I've got around 30 of the old Necron Warriors from this era. What I like about this miniature is how their head is dropped down like that original artwork, but of course it's a lot more basic, and of course it's made of metal, as most of the miniatures were back then. It's interesting to see that huge collar around the warrior there, which a lot of the new Scorpec models now have. So that's something which has been around for a very long time. It's hard to say whether I would have got into Necrons from this release right at the beginning. I'd like to think that I would, because, well, they are basically Terminators and they just look so cool, and I'm a huge Terminator fan. I'm a huge science fiction fan, so I do like to play Xenos armies. But I think if I was into the hobby back then, I would have been very smitten with that model on the copy of White Dwarf. We were given hints about the mysterious Necrontyr, and we learnt about advanced repair systems of the Necron Warriors. At the time, they only had 2 units in their army, Necron Warriors and Scarabs, but frankly, they were so good you only needed 2 units. Yeah, I've heard about this. Necrons were absolutely awesome when they first came out. There was even a special scenario where Imperial troops were trying to capture a mysterious Necron for the Inquisition to study. They should have just bought a copy of White Dwarf and had a free Necron model on the front cover. Yeah, so Games Workshop obviously trying to be as funny as ever. The Necron Warriors were already very tough to kill and could take out almost any target with their Gauss flayers, and they only had to wait a month for reinforcements to arrive in White Dwarf 218, which introduced the Necron Lord and Necron Destroyer. Okay, so now I'm going to look out for copy 218 of White Dwarf as well, because, well, again, they've got the old Necrons in. Okay, so we had the Necron Warrior, and these were the 2 next models. The Lord on the left there, I actually own this model. I used him as a conversion that I did where I've got him riding on the top of an old tomb spider. That's the old metal canoptic spider. And I use him for a Catacomb Command Barge stand-in or a Destroyer Lord stand-in. But he just looks very cool, and I thought it would be nice to do something different with that classic miniature. And then on the right we've got the Destroyers, which again I've got a number of these. At the moment I've got 8. I do want to get a few more to take me up to 12, so I can split them up into 2 units of 6 and play the old Destroyers. However, they've been in my army proxying in as Tombblades for a while because I didn't have the Tombblade models. However, I've got some Tombblade models now, so these are just Destroyers in my army. But I really do like those models, also known as the deck chair Necrons, because they're sitting down very comfortably. However, that was the first Necron to be hovering in the air, and that was one of the things which really attracted me to Necrons. I liked the idea of these hovering units across the battlefield. I've even converted 3 of these to be heavy destroyers as well. I actually made a video on that conversion, so I'll link you up to that in the description below. And if you have these old models, then let me know in the comments box below. I'd be interested to know, do you still use them, or are they just part of your collection? Personally, I'm really looking forward to playing an army with 3 units of destroyers. I'm going to have 1 as these old destroyers, 1 unit with the current ones with the green rods, and then 1 with the new Lockhurst destroyers. So 3 destroyer units from 3 generations. I'm really looking forward to playing that. I think that would be super cool. Okay, so then they say, as you can see, the destroyer has changed quite significantly since then. The Necron army would continue to grow with the addition of the Immortals as a hard-hitting infantry unit, and a name was given to the Necrons' mysterious disappearance once their numbers dwindled. Phase out. Of course, for opponents, reducing them to 25% of their starting force was easier said than done. Now, I'm not sure if they're talking about the 3rd edition Codex that I started with here, which did have the phase out special rule, or whether phase out was before that. I must admit, this section of the article, I was slightly disappointed that they haven't sort of named when the 3rd edition Codex came out and the changes that were made then. So they sort of skipped a little bit here, especially when it comes to dates. However, when I first started out, Necrons certainly were difficult to kill. They had a 3+ save, you could give them a 4+ reanimation, or will be back as it was called then. Plus, when a model died, he could actually join another unit as well, which was quite an interesting rule, but it did mean you had to have multiple units of the same type on the table so that you could actually get back up and join another unit. And Necrons were quite points heavy back then, which arguably you could say they still are, but yeah, a warrior used to be 18 points, so 2 squads of 10 warriors, and then a lord, which was around 200 points. You didn't have too many points to play with when you were playing at 1,000 points. However, they certainly were very durable, and that's what I liked about Necrons. They were difficult to kill, and that's how they should be. Going green. These early Necrons were missing a certain something that since became associated with their weapons over the years. A new millennium saw the inaugural. What the hell? Inaugural. Okay. Inaugural. A new millennium saw inaugural Codex. Inaugural. What does it mean even? Okay, let's Google what it means. Marking the beginning of an institution. A new millennium saw the beginning of the Necron Codex and the first range of Necrons in plastic. And there it was, the green plastic rod. It was on the Necron Lords, the Destroyers, the Anti-Psyker Pariahs, and there was even a massive green plastic crystal on top of the monolith. Okay, so now we're looking around 2000, which is just before I started. As I said, I started in 2001, and one of the big things that drew me to the Necrons were this picture on front of the 3rd edition Necron Codex. I saw this picture and fell in love with Necrons, and then as I flicked through the pages, it was almost definitely the green rods which made me want to play Necrons. I really liked the green rods. They were very science fiction, they were very different, and they were very cool. Actually, I was very disappointed when it came to buying and painting my Canoptic Spider, or the Tomb Spider as it was back then, the old metal one, because it didn't have a green rod, it just had a lump of metal as a rod. And I wasn't into conversions back then, so I didn't know anything about how to clip out that metal piece and add in a green rod. So what I did is I painted it to look as much like a green rod as I could. So it's one block colour, and my idea was to make it look like a green rod. And actually there's more to come on that later, because I've also done that on quite a few other models. So for me, the heart of the Necron army is green rods. Now I know not everyone likes it, and obviously things have changed, which we'll talk about more in a minute. However, I like green rods, and like I said, I grew up with green rods. It's what attracted me to the army. And then we have a picture of the Pariah, and to my surprise, although maybe it shouldn't be to my surprise, but there was quite a number of comments around this picture saying, what are they? I've never seen them before, which obviously to me, growing up with these particular miniatures, was a bit odd, but of course, if you're a new player, then you won't have a clue what these are. So yeah, the Necron Pariah was our anti-psychic unit. They had a Gauss blaster, which was the same weapon as the Immortal, and it was built into their Warsai, where Warsais back then ignored invulnerable saves. They were a cool unit. They were quite expensive, 36 points each, and they had no will be back. They had no RP ability. However, they were discontinued from the Codex, which again we'll talk more about in a minute. So it's a unit now which I suppose almost has been replaced by Lichguard stroke Praetorians. They've sort of split this unit into two different models. They were written out of the Codex when they came up with some new fluff in around 6th edition, which, well, personally I think is a big shame, and I know there's quite a few Necron players that were hoping that the Psychic Awakening Pariah release was going to feature the return of these Pariah, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. It was about the Nexus Pariah. However, super cool models, and I have these models and I still play them today. I have considered converting them to put a shield on their arm to make them into Lichguard, but to be honest, well, I don't really want to ruin the original models because I love them so much, so they're going to stay as they are. Now, they talked about the original Necron Immortal, but they didn't actually show you a picture until now, and now we have a picture. Even the Necron Immortals had an upgrade, their guns to include the magic rod, and, well, a bit of an odd upgrade because they made them smaller, which is quite interesting. But the one on the left there, the original Immortal, once again has the head quite low down on the body, and they sort of got rid of that design with the new miniatures. The Immortal there with the head much more upwards, and going back to the Warriors there, their heads have been moved upwards from the original Warriors and indeed the original artwork. I have no idea why they did that, but obviously that was the design concept. And 2 green rods on the new Immortals, really cool. And then we saw destroyers with 4 green rods in them. As I said, I was a huge fan of the green rods. Now, I do own one of the original Immortals, yes, just one, but I went to town on this guy when I built him. As I only had one, I thought I'd make him into a centerpiece, maybe an objective potentially. So I gave him a bigger base and I put some scarabs on his base. I'm now thinking he would make a very cool Necron Warden with the new 9th edition rules, because A, I've only got one of them, so I'm not going to play a unit of those models, so he'll stand out quite well, and B, well, he does look like a beefed up Immortal, which is basically what the Warden is. So I'm going to use him as a Warden from now on, and that's great because it means I can get the old models into my army, and I love playing with the old miniatures. Okay, so these were the days before Cryptex entered the game, and it's easy to see why. They were so busy putting green plastic rods onto the forces of the Necrons that they just didn't have time to actually fight. Okay, so they're saying that the Cryptex put these little green plastic rods on. Don't think that was the case, but see where they're going with this. Adding some character. The next Necron Codex would really bring the Necron legions to life. Well, not really life, since they're still evil space robots, but you know what we mean. It would introduce a whole raft of new Necron units that are still with us, including transports, flyers, and Necrons on jet bikes. Okay, so this is where I think they could have put a date in this article because, well, it would be quite interesting. However, they haven't, but I can tell you that this is around 6th edition. They introduced the new Codex after 10 years of the old one, and with it we got some new models, some new tanks. Before then we only had the Monolith. They introduced flyers, the Doomsday Ark, the Ghost Ark, the Annihilation Barge, and of course these Tomb Blades. And along with it they introduced new fluff, trying to make the fluff richer and bringing in new options for the Necrons, including a brand new gun, which is the Tesla gun. And that was the first gun that came in that didn't have a green rod. Now, I'm the type of person that doesn't really like change. I have to be honest, I like things to stay how they are. However, yeah, things did change quite dramatically with that new release. Not only did they remove the fluff and replace it with the new fluff, not only did they discontinued the Pariah models, but they came out with these new kits that didn't have green rods. And I got a bit down regarding that. I wasn't happy that we had these changes. Yes, it was nice to have some new miniatures, and I enjoyed the new miniatures. However, I liked Necrons how they used to be, with no personality, with not many weapon options. That's how I grew up, playing Necrons in that way, so this was a big change for me. However, I did adapt, of course, as we always do, we're human beings. However, I did get quite sad-faced when Necrons came out. Now, unlike today in 8th edition, where I only played Necrons, back then I was playing all my other armies as well. So I've got a Tyranid army, an Eldar army, Dark Eldar, I've got Space Wolves as well, and of course now I've got Chaos, although I haven't played them yet. So I was playing other armies at the same time, not just Necrons, so I sort of phased away from Necrons a little bit back then, and I started to play my other armies. I also wasn't in a position where I had too much surplus cash back then. My children were young, I had other commitments, I wasn't quite as high up in the ladder with my job, so my wages were lower, and all of these new models came out. And like I said, one reason why I was proxying my old destroyers for Tomb Blades was because, well, I couldn't afford to buy all of the miniatures. However, I did buy a few, of course, because, well, I still love Necrons. And the next model that I bought was this one, Imitech the Stormlord. That's what you get for using word shambling in vain. The new Necron Codex also introduced named characters for the first time. Now, Imitech the Stormlord could command your legions of Necron Warriors, and it was good to see him following the fashion of the first Necron Lord model by wearing a segmented cape. Well, yes it was. However, no green rod. I immediately put a green rod in my Imitech model. But also, he was fine cast, and Imitech the Stormlord was my first fine cast model that I purchased, and having returned him twice put me off fine cast for life. I did buy a few other fine cast models. I bought some Venom Throats for my Tyranids. They were dreadful, holes everywhere, a bit missing. I didn't bother to send it back, I just green stuffed in the bit that was missing. But yeah, fine cast, I now totally refuse to buy any finecast model whatsoever. I refuse to, well, let Games Workshop think that I will buy it, because I won't. Plastic, fine. Metal, fine. Finecast, it's just not for me. I know some people have good experiences with it and the quality is supposed to be better, but I recently did an Orc commission with some finecast Orc models, and the flash on them was just dreadful. So yeah, Finecast and me, no thanks. The various dynasties were also explored, meaning that we got to see what happened if you painted over that green plastic rod. And there we've got a pretty cool looking warrior there with an orange rod. Now I'm wondering if Games Workshop produced these rods, maybe sold them separately in different colours, whether we would have seen things like this where people painted over the rod. I mean, obviously some people would, but maybe not as many. It was also the start of the phasing out of the rod though. A new Necron Immortals kit not only ditched the green plastic, but also introduced Tesla weaponry alongside Gauss. And right here, this is where my sad face really came into play, because no green rods, and like I said, that was a bit disappointing. So when it came to painting Tesla weapons on my Annihilation Barge, on my Night Scythe, I painted them as much as I could like an actual green rod. Now I currently don't own any of these Tesla Immortals. I'm actually using my old Warriors as Tesla Immortals because, well, they're very different from the Gauss Warriors that I own, so it's quite easy to tell which is which. However, I am planning to get some proper Tesla Immortals. When I do, then these guys here will become Warriors once again, and that will give me 90 Warriors. So I'll have 30 metal ones, I'll have 60 of the plastic ones with the green rod, and then any new Warriors that I get, I'm going to build with the Gauss Reaper option. So I'll have plenty of Warriors for 9th edition. Over the next few years, we'd see a new Necron Codex that brought in incredible Necron formations and rules for fielding some of the more famous dynasties. We delve deeper into the history of the Necron tier and their relationship with the Catan Star Guards. Throughout it all, the Necron Warriors kept their green plastic rods, even as the Immortals and Necron Lords were getting rid of theirs to try and keep up with the latest fashions. Now again, it would be nice to have some dates here, but they're talking about the formations from the 7th edition Codex, where I think Necrons were probably the most powerful they'd been since they were originally released. And of course it was the start of the death of green rods. Now, no matter what you say, I think the reason why they got rid of the green rods is because A, we're getting a little bit more modern now. The models themselves are a lot more professional, let's say. In the old days, the models could be gawky and no one really cared. But I think now, with the technology that they have and how the game and the models have changed, it probably actually is a good time to remove the green rods. Even though it does make me sad, I can totally understand why they've done it, and I also can totally understand how the new generation of players think that the green rods were dreadful and, you know, they're really happy that they've gone. So I can see both sides of the story, which brings us nicely on to the next slide, dominating a new edition, which brings us to the present and the Indomitus boxed set. The new plastic Necron Warriors may have put away their green plastic rods for the last time, but they are still the super tough robotic killing machines that we first met back in 1998. Okay, a date, which is good. I would disagree that they're the super tough robotic killing machines that we first met. I mean, Necron Warriors are nothing like they used to be. I mean, if you rolled a 6 to wounds in the old days, you would glance a vehicle, you would automatically wound a monstrous creature. They were toughness 4, the same as they are now, but they had a 3+ save and you could have a 4+ RP. So, well, of course, we don't know all of the rules yet of the new Codex, but from what I've seen so far, I disagree with you there, Games Workshop. They're not the super tough robotic killing machines that we first met in 1998. Anyway, in fact, they still even have that combat blade on their weapons that we first saw on the Chaos Android. Indeed they do, which is really good to see. And it's also good to see that their heads are actually slightly lower, once again, like the original artwork. And of course now, whilst some people don't like it, and admittedly I didn't like it at first, but they have some battle damage. Now the good thing about this kit is we're going to get different heads that aren't battle damaged, but personally I think I'm going to go for the battle damaged look because, like I said, I'm going to build these new warriors with the Gauss Reapers, which means, well, they're probably going to be at closer range with those weapons, and they're probably going to need to reanimate a lot more, and they're going to be more battle damaged. So I'm actually liking the battle damage. I know some people don't like it. I've had people ask me, can you do a tutorial on how to remove the battle damage, which I may actually consider doing. However, whilst I didn't like it at first, I now do, and I think it stems from the fact that I know that the original artwork for Necrons, well, they were supposed to be battle damaged back then, but of course making battle damaged models when they were metal was far more difficult than it is now. So I think Games Workshop have gone in the right direction with their battle damaged new units. But what do you think? So that's my history, but feel free to let me know what your history is in the comments box below. I always love to hear from you. And here is my review of the 3rd edition Necron Codex, the Codex that got me into the hobby. Beam me up!